We'll get started here in a couple minutes. We'll give people just a little bit of time. If you have any problems or if you have to leave, we will have a replay of this later. So no problem at all.
This is the first time we've done this. We're calling this Trial Review Tuesday. So we've got 4 Tuesdays, I think, in the month of June. So this will be the first one. If the technology works okay today, then I think we're planning on going ahead and doing it again next week, the next week. And if you've already submitted a video and it's not included today, it may still be included in the future. So don't worry about that. But if there's a lot of submissions, obviously we're not going to be able to get them all. Today, hopefully, we're going to be able to get through 3 videos. I'm not sure how long it'll take. So we're not planning on going more than an hour. Definitely, I'm guessing somewhere in the 30 to 60-minute range.
But feel free to ask your questions. We'll be looking here on Facebook for these questions.
Right. So as soon as the question pops up, go ahead and ask it. And even if we aren't able to address it on air, we will come behind and review the questions after the fact and respond to your questions as well. You can also email us privately if you'd rather ask your question there. If you are one of the people whose videos that we're looking at, same thing, ask your questions. I think, are we going to go ahead and start? Pretty much.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so first I just want to talk a little bit about video review. And I think as a student or someone who is getting your video reviewed, I think the most important thing is to be open-minded and not defensive, right? And a lot of times I have found myself thinking, well, something that I did on course, which maybe didn't work out, is justified. And so it turns out that a lot of mistakes that happen in agility are good mistakes. They're okay. Things are going to happen. It's not a problem. But there are also places in agility where it works out. You qualify, you win, you have a clean run, but you did something probably that you shouldn't do that may cost you something later on, or you just got lucky, and those are things we generally want to remove from our handling. So when we look at videos, we don't want to have an ends justify the means approach to agility. All right, that's very kind of low-level thinking. Well, hey, it worked, therefore it must be a good thing, and I want to try and do that thing again. Agility doesn't really work like that. And I think you can kind of see the comparison there to many things in life, right? Things happen, they're not good, and so we try and get rid of them, even if it happened to have worked out that one time. But this is a very common theme in sports, and in all sports, people spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, what used to work but doesn't work as well anymore. How do you stay on top, and what's just dumb luck? Right, it really doesn't need to be changed one way or the other. But if we're reviewing your video is one of the ones we're looking at. I want you to separate what you're hearing from your own ego, because sometimes it's hard to get feedback without feeling criticized. Just in general, I know that I'm not very good at getting feedback, right? If someone tells me whatever, right? You have some ketchup on your face, I'll be like, I meant for the ketchup to be there. I knew it was there all along. This is actually quite fashionable in some parts of southern France. And so, the mind kind of does that. So I just want you to be aware of your own feelings and kind of separate that. And the better you're able to do that, the better you're going to be able to look at your own runs and improve, right? People who have a hard time doing that, even if there's no one else involved, if it's just them, they have a hard time being even self-critical and really making the kind of improvements that you can make quickly when you're very, very honest with yourself. And so I think there's a lot of integrity in the video analysis game. Let me put it that way. All right. Okay.
Excellent.
So now I think we've hit about 70 people. We want to go ahead and get started with the first video. And
The first video I am going to be looking at.
Are you switching, or everyone can see this already?
Yes. I'm going to do one thing here. Oh, we've got people from Michigan, Ohio.
That's
Ohio.
almost Hawaii.
Almost Hawaii.
Almost Hawaii.
Okay, just making sure the sound was still working. I saw it pause there for a second, but it looks like we're good. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our camera while we're doing the analysis. Just, let's just put things in our favor in terms of bandwidth.
Oh, okay. Sure.
So there we go. All right. So now we just have a video here, and this is from, I don't know exactly who this is from. She took us at our word when we said, send us a video. She sent us a video, and no signature, but it's from Potts. And I wanted to go over this video because I think that it's a run where if you watched this, you would probably say, oh, that was a really great run, except for the one problem that happens midway through the course. But I think that there are some areas for improvement in a couple of spots where, like you were saying, it doesn't cost anything. The dog correctly takes the obstacles, but we could clean up the handling just a little bit.
Okay, so first, we're not able to, because of bandwidth reasons, play the whole video at full speed. So at full speed, if we just play the video, it's very choppy and you can't see things very well. So we're not going to do that. So what Sarah's going to do is provide a link to the video so you can look at it in full regular speed. Yeah.
Do you want me to do that right now?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that. We will look at this together. And the one thing that I will say, if you had a chance to watch this video at full speed, what you're going to see is an international style course. So you're going to see backsides, challenges like that. And you're going to see a very high level dog and handler, right? The handler is obviously skilled in both handling and training. The dog is very talented. This is the kind of dog that you would expect to find at big competitions, both at the national and international level. And I think for a lot of people, when you, and don't worry, we have a variety of dogs that we selected here, but this is kind of on your more high end. And when you go to these big events, and especially if you're an instructor and you're working with these types of students, it can be difficult or intimidating to try and figure out where they can improve. So I'm going to show you some quick tips on how you can use the coach's eye to find those places that you can improve. Because if you are getting clean runs 70, 80% of the time, you're always winning, you're in the ribbons, you're doing very well, you're only losing to the very best dogs, it's very hard for someone to come and say, well, here are your problem areas, because they're not easily found, right? And so one of the ways that you can go and look for them is comparison to what the very top dogs are doing. And we have some standards that we use so that I can see a video like this, not know anything about the handler, and find some places where they can get even better.
All right. So I've pasted that link into the comments. So anybody who wants to go watch the full speed version can do that.
Right. And I think on this one, I think we're both going to talk about different spots here. But let me go ahead and let Sarah get started.
Okay. All right. So starting off, one thing I'm always going to look at is the start. And the dog clearly is ready to go, but does wait for that release to take steps forward. So beautiful weave pole entry. And the first thing that I wanted to point out is this front cross after the weave poles. So this is something that I think at real time, you might not notice anything. If we just scroll forward, we're going to see the dog come out of the weave poles and correctly go and take this red jump. But when we slow it down and we look at it in slow motion, we think, okay, here the dog is exiting the poles. Does the dog have the information that they need to know where to go next? And I would say at this point, no. They probably do realize that a front cross is coming, and so they are preparing to turn in this direction. But they have to kind of wait for the handler for just a beat. And you can see they even come out, and there's maybe a little head check here as the dog is waiting to see where this finished front cross is going to take them. So ideally, we would actually start the front cross while the dog was 1 or 2 poles back from here, and we would be already through it and setting the new direction as the dog was exiting, so that they would have no doubt and they would know exactly where they're going.
Right, so the dog needs the information right here, and we can actually see how late this front cross is. So right here, the handler is taking what we call the power step after the front cross. They're setting the line. And you can see that we're talking about tenths of a second. It's less than 1 second, but that's the edge that we're talking about. Maybe if we set the line a little bit more quickly, the dog takes out one stride and gains a tenth of a second here. All right, and now let's go ahead and move on to the next part of the course. Here again, the same thing that Sarah's talking about. One of the things that we're going to talk about is freezing the video at the dog's takeoff point. The takeoff point is here. You can see the dog's front feet are in the air. And the dog is about to take the jump. That much is clear. But at this takeoff point, the dog needs to know what's after the jump. And so everybody who's watching now, I want you to type in there, what obstacle do you think is next? And let me give you a couple choices. We have a jump over here. We have a jump over here. Maybe we go back to the weave poles. I definitely see this tunnel over here. Maybe that there are some jumps off camera that we can't see. What obstacle do you think is the one that is coming after this red jump? I'll let you can write it in. We'll say number 2 is the weaves. We'll say number 3 is the tunnel. We'll say number 4 is maybe some other obstacle.
All right. So Vicky says tunnel. Cheryl says tunnel.
Okay. So I agree. I think pretty clearly indicating the tunnel here. And let's see what happens. Okay. I think we're all still thinking tunnel. The dog is now over the bar. So I feel pretty good that the dog should go into the tunnel. And now the landing, okay? So we notice that the handler has started to turn toward the dog, and the dog definitely is locked onto the tunnel. The line of the dog is actually past the tunnel. That means if the dog ran in a straight line from the takeoff point, that's where they're headed. And so when the handler wants to turn the dog is going to turn. This is the first thing they see. So I think all systems are go for the tunnel. But watch this. Okay, so what's happened here? So the handler has executed a front cross, and it turns out the tunnel was not the correct obstacle. All right, so when we look at this at full speed, it looks very good. The dog lands and then immediately goes to the correct obstacle, which is this jump. But here in coach's eye in slow motion, we see that the dog was fully prepared to take the tunnel and actually moved in that direction. So this turn is going to be wide. So everybody can see that here. So this is a spot where she can save 2, maybe even 3 tenths of a second. You add that to the 1/10 of a second on the weave poles, and now you have this very, very good dog who may finish 3rd or 4th against elite world team competition. Now she's gained half a second, right? And now she's a half second closer to her goal of winning.
And I think also when you look at this, this dog is extremely responsive to her cues. Obviously, he checked in, he made that turn, he didn't take the tunnel. But in addition to saving time, I think there are many dogs that would not have made that turn. They would have taken the tunnel. They would not have been quite as responsive.
What if you had a lab? What if you had a golden? What if you had a more squarely structured dog, right? Maybe they would have fallen. Maybe they would have slipped in the grass as well. Border Collies are very agile. This is why they are the kings and queens of the sport. All right, so here we go. Beautiful backside here. On to the next part of the course. And here I'm just going to roll through here and ask you, before we see this cross, here we are at the takeoff point again. The front feet are in the air, and we're going to play the same game again. Let's see, where is the dog going? Are they headed here? Are we headed, I see a tire kind of over here. See the dog walk over here. Here's the teeter, it's facing the wrong way. What do you think is the next obstacle after this red jump? Clearly, we want to take the red jump. You can see from the distance and the approach that the dog is taking this jump in extension. Okay, so that already means we're not doing a tight turn from the dog. What do you think?
Vicky says dog walk, but I think she saw that 1 second that you fast forward.
Yeah. So right here at this moment, there's no way in my head or the dog's head that we're thinking dog walk. All right, and I hopefully everybody can see that. The handler has not yet started turning. They're facing this way. They're moving this way. The dog is so committed to that line that the dog is taking off early to extend and kind of head toward this broad jump. Okay, everybody can see that? Now, once the dog is in the air, the dog cannot change their trajectory. This is just physics. Okay, and even in the air, you can see the handler is still facing in the direction of this broad jump. Now watch what the handler does. as the dog is over the bar, the handler completely changes direction and is now facing and moving in the way that she wants the dog to go, and that is toward the dog walk. So this is the moment, I would say, that the dog knows that they're taking the dog walk. This is where the dog is. And you can see that the dog lands and has to take a quarter stride in this direction before they can start to square up. Okay, now I'm going to tell you something very interesting about this turn here. So in general, this is not an ideal turn, right? The dog takes off in extension, the turn's a little bit wide. But for this scenario, this turn is actually very good. Why is this turn very good? Can anybody think why? Let me play it for you here. Right, and it has to do with the dog walk approach. So the dog goes a little bit wide here, but what does that allow the dog to do? It allows the dog to have a perfectly straight dog walk approach. So this might be a situation where I'm looking at this and I say, okay, in general, we don't want to do blind crosses on turns this tight in this situation because it'll make your dog go wide. But maybe she's deliberately trying to get a little bit of a wide turn in order to get the perfect square approach. If you were to wrap this red jump, you would enter the dog walk at an angle and maybe be more likely to slip off. All right. So those are things to consider. Like, what if we're doing a jumper's course and it's not a dog walk and that's a tunnel? Then probably we don't want that wide turn, right? Okay, now we're going to take a look at the dog walk. And this is one of the cool things that we can do with the coach's eye. And what we're going to do is mark the first paw hit on the dog walk, which is about right here. And we're going to get a time on this dog walk performance. Because we know that this is a very high level dog. We know this handler submits this video and they're looking for places that they can improve. And this is one of them. So here's a fly off, right? But even if the dog had not flown off, let's assume the dog assumed the 2 on 2 off position, it's in greater than 2.1 seconds. So we know that running contact dogs are going to be able to do this in 1.60 seconds on average, right? So this handler is losing 0.5 seconds here to a running contact dog. We know that a stop contact dog, the very best ones, can go anywhere from 1.8 to 1.9. So even to those dogs, right, she's losing 3 or 4 tenths of a second. Now, if we add up, say, let's be conservative, we add 3 tenths of a second to 4 tenths of a second earlier, now already we're seeing that we're approaching a 1 second drop in time, right? So one thing we're going to do here with this handler is, okay, maybe this was unlucky. Maybe the dog hits every time, and just in this one video they did it. And I will point out that it's very common when you have a tunnel after the dog walk that the dogs leap off. All right. So yeah, it looks like the dog, in fact, it looks like the dog is heading for the tunnel. And so you get a wide turn here. All right, so this looks like the handler has called the dog off of the tunnel. So the tunnel is not the correct obstacle. So it may be that the tunnel caused the fly off and also the wide turn here. So I think that's a spot where you just need practice in that situation. All right, so far we've gained this handler about 7 tenths of a second. And we're going to get to the next contact. And it's a little hard to see where the front feet are hitting. Let's assume it's hitting here. We're guessing a little bit. I can't see it very well. And here we have a fly off. So here the teeter has not yet hit the ground. You can see space right in here. And the dog is completely off the teeter. Let's wiggle it back and forth. You can see it a little better. So I think it's probably not coincidence that the dog has flown off both the dog walk and the teeter, right? So this is probably a contact issue that's going on. So you can see that we often work really hard on our handling. You know, we go to all the best seminars and train with all the best people and really perfect all our moves to really fight for 2 or 3 tenths of a second when the low-hanging fruit is, you know, maybe contact work, right? So obviously that I think that would be something for this person to work on. And here we have a very strong finish. Handler's just running this out. Broad jump. Over and in through here, I think the dog slows down. There's a lot of options here. And you tell me, I'm going to freeze it right here. This is the dog coming over the bar. What obstacle is next? Are we doing a move here, here, or we happen to know from earlier in the course, there is a tunnel over there that we can't see yet? 3 choices. What do you guys think? What are we looking at here? And we'll go on as soon as someone puts up a guess.
I'm not seeing anything, but I'm not sure if I'm.
All right, looks like your phone may have crashed. Okay, I'm going to assume people have made their guesses. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I know that given the head check, there's a head check and the handler is falling behind, right? And so this is a handler who looks like they have a style where the dog runs with them. So when that happens and they're not highly verbal or don't have a lot of distance work, the dogs tend to curl back toward the handler. So I think the most likely candidate for this dog, the dog is thinking, is over here. Let's jump here. Okay, and then now, right as the dog lands, we have a verbal cue paired with an arm. Does everybody see that? So let me show you. Here the dog is looking at the handler, right? Or looking in this direction. And the line, I'm going to draw a line, it's kind of this way. Now the dog lands and has been straightened out. So the line changes. So maybe the dog is going to curl in and then they end up doing this. Everybody can see that? Okay, so why is that a big deal? From where we're looking at the line, we maybe want to get that cue out a little bit sooner to keep the dog in full extension. And it turns out we want the dog into the tunnel. But I still think they did a very nice job. But I'm going to make the case that if the handler weren't here, if they were up here and the dog were chasing them toward the tunnel, this would be a little bit faster. Not too much though. Oops, ignore that green line here. Beautiful execution here. One thing we always want to do when we're analyzing a video is find where you're doing something that's really good and you want to do it again. And so this is something that a lot of people struggle with, is backside serps. Okay. Some people might want a slicier line. I don't, because my dogs tend to brush the uprights of the wings. They really drop the bars. So a couple things here. One, you can see that the handler is moving in this direction while the dog's moving in this direction. That implies very good commitment. So I understand that this dog and trainer are highly skilled. And two, it moves the handler completely out of the way of the dog. Three, that lets the handler get ahead of the dog. So she can set the proper next line, which is going to be to this A-frame here.
All right, we did have people putting in their guesses. So they are hearing you, and we had guesses of jump on left, jump on right, backside of the jump, tunnel, basically all the options.
Right, okay, and then one last thing, straight tunnels are tough. If the handler's running full speed as the dog approaches the straight tunnel, the dog is going to want to tend to go straight. And that's exactly what happens here. Take a look. The handler wants to turn the dog, but the handler is facing this way, moving that way, and the dog is going to turn wide. You can see we want to get to this backside, but the dog goes really wide. Instead of doing this, they take a much wider approach to this backside. You see that? So I think that's a spot where we need some kind of cueing system or verbal cue to let the dog know before they go in the tunnel that they need to turn a little bit tighter. And that's a tough one. So the dogs need to know, am I going straight? Am I turning sharply? Am I doing something in between? This dog had to do something in between, but they were going straight based on the handler motion before the tunnel. And here she's going to have a good finish and be done with the course. All right, so if you have any questions about that, go ahead and put them in, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next course. But that's a really great run. You can see that the dog is very high level, the handler is very high level. They have a lot of training skills. Obviously you're going to work a little bit on the context there. But in terms of timing for this handler, we want her to be reviewing her videos and really checking her dog's takeoff point every time. And if she does everything a little bit sooner, what she's going to find is her dog's going to start turning tighter. And every tighter turn is going to be another 1, 2, or 3/10 of a second she gains. And if she has 2 wide turns on the course, now she's gaining 6/10 of a second. She fixes her contact, now she gains another ½ second. Now you're gaining 1.1 to 1.5 seconds in a run. So maybe she ends up finishing 4th, 5th place, but now with that extra second and a half, she's contending for the win, right? That's how close the margins are at this level, at the very high levels. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay. So next, okay. Oops.
Okay, we're just gonna back up. I really like this run, and I really love this dog. This is a lab. I think they're running this is performance 16-inch, right? So the dog would normally jump 20 inches.
Yes.
I can't quite tell from looking at the bars. I think this is set at 16 inches and not 20 inches. And the first issue or question that this handler has is this is a dog that tends to drop some bars. And I believe this is the young lab, right? And so this is going to be one, you need to recognize that this is going to be very common in, I feel like almost every line of labs and golden retrievers that are fast. Find me a fast line of those retriever breeds that doesn't drop bars, and that breeder is going to make a lot of money, okay, because people are going to want those dogs. So we know that there's something that's probably structural. Some people speculate it's related to eyesight. You know, I don't know. I'm not an expert on those things. I'm just telling you that fast labs and goldens tend to drop bars a little bit more than average, is my point here. But one thing that I want to show you on this course and this course layout is how the layout can really affect bar knocking for these dogs. And so the first thing I want you to notice is I can see right away when we look at these three obstacles, they're very close together. Okay, mentally, if I'm trying to guess how many feet separate obstacles 1 and 3, in my mind, it's not enough. Okay, if we have 20 feet between each obstacle, there should be at least 40 feet on this curve, and I don't know if we're getting that. All right, and so let's just take a look at the dog striding. This is again at 16 inches with a pretty fast dog. Here the dog brushes this bar. You can see the bar vibrate. That's bar number 1. Here's 1 hit, 2 hit, 3 hit, and you can see how close the dog is to the next bar to get down that 3rd hit. Right, skims this jump. 1 hit, 2 hits, and the dog has to jump immediately. You can see there's absolutely no room for a 3rd hit here. Right, so let's look at that again. 1, 2, the dog has to jump and yank the feet up. You can see the feet might be about to hit the bar, but they yank their feet up and they have to turn at the same time. So it turns out that doing a 180 turn, you're more likely to keep a bar up with a bar knocker than if you ask them to take a 30-degree or slight turn. And that's what this whole opening course is. It's one slight turn after another, right? So back in the day, as a handler, I used to think these were the easiest courses, right? Straight lines, slight curves, these are very easy. But for a bar knocker, these dogs, you know, you kind of get that centripetal force, right? Kind of wanting to throw you out to the side. They have to continually turn, and they're not getting the space that they need to clear these bars in all cases, right? And so here we go, once, twice, and the dog has to get up again. Now you can see how awkward it is, and the bar comes down. You see that? Here's the bar. I'm going to draw a line right below it. You can see it drop right there, okay? So you want to ask, well, what did the dog need to do to keep the bar up? Okay, here's 1, here's 2. So it looks like the dog needed to take an extra stride, right? The dog is too far away. That's why this bar comes down. Look at how hard the dog is working and bringing up these rear feet to keep that bar up. Still gets the bar, right? Working really hard. So then the next question for me is, okay, my dog needed to put in an extra stride. Is there room for this extra stride? Where's the room, right? Let's look at it again. 1, 2. If they put in the 3rd stride, I'm going to tell you this dog is now too close, right? They're highly likely to knock the bar anyway, right? So for some dogs with some structures at a certain speed, at certain angles, these jumps are simply too close. I'm not saying they're always going to drop a bar. I'm just saying the odds of them dropping a bar are very high. If we put a Papillon at 8 inches with this distance, it's not an issue. You put a super bendy border collie at 24 inches, and they can definitely perfectly do it well with 2 hits. But at 16 inches, with this flattened out stride and speed, this dog is going to struggle. They're too fast and too big strided to put in an extra super quick short stride, and they're too far away to launch from where they are in order to clear it just right. Okay, and so this is how the courses can really impact it. It's why I think there's a very big movement going on right now in agility all around the world to get proper spacing for our big dogs and very specific breeds. Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, 3 into the viaduct. But you see how the dog needed to do 3. So if we look at it again, here's 1, 2. So you see how 2 would be too far away. And 3, the dog had to kind of throw on the brakes a little bit, right, to be able to get over that. Okay, now let's stop with the jumping talk. Hopefully that made sense to you people. And I'm not encouraging us to be down on organizations or judges. I just want to point that out to you because a lot of people are very frustrated with bars and they don't understand exactly what's going on. So I know a lot about this because the Gitchy, the golden retriever I was working with, she's a bar knocker, right? She's retired now. And I got the opportunity to run her at 20, 24, 26 over several years on many different kinds of courses. And so I'm just sharing with you all of my observations, including the literally thousands of video reviews that we've done over the last 5 to 7 years. Okay, so now let's take a look at this handler. And the dog is about to take off. I'm going to freeze it right here. Okay, dog is over the viaduct. Where are we going? Here's a tunnel entrance. Here's a tunnel entrance. Here's a jump. Here's another tunnel. It's time to play that game again. Everybody tell me where you think they're going. Is it tunnel entrance number 1, tunnel entrance number 2, or is it jump number 3? I think those are probably all the most likely targets. If I zoom out, actually, I guess it's possible the dog could come back to get this white jump, number 4. Maybe a late front cross is happening here. Okay, everybody kind of have their guess? All right, let's take a look. Okay, the handler throws up the opposite arm. So opposite arms have different meanings to different dogs and people, right? Some people teach the opposite arm. It means you're going to go a rear cross and you need to turn away from me. Some people teach the opposite arm as a throttle cue. You need to come in toward me and then take the second choice. Some people teach this opposite arm as the opening part of the front cross. So they're about to front cross and the dog needs to turn toward them. So you can see that even turning away from me or to me really depends on the team. And I've never seen this team run before. So we have an opposite arm and we're not sure what it means, but I can see the effect on the dog. The dog was headed for the tunnel and they turned. They turned toward the handler. Okay, they turn toward the handler and now they turn away from the handler. So to me, this looks like throttle handling, right? The dog was on a line for the wrong end of the tunnel. The opposite arm pulls the dog in and tells them, go take this other tunnel over here. But wait, that's not the full story. Clearly, I'm wrong because now we've got a call from the judge. Okay? So the dog did this. I thought based on the handling, that was a pretty reasonable thing to do, not knowing anything about the handler. But clearly, this is an off course. All right? So maybe the dog was supposed to go straight into the tunnel. But I think the most likely thing is the dog was supposed to take this jump.
And here we have feedback from the handler who said that she was intending to slice and then turn to the tunnel.
Right.
And she thinks she used the wrong arm. So she recognized that in the heat of the moment, she threw up that opposite arm.
Right. So you can see how arm and arm consistency is pretty important. So on a rear cross, I would definitely send the dog on the left arm here. And then as the dog takes off this way, I would put a lot of pressure on them in order to turn them. If I don't, the dog will suck right into this tunnel here or wrap toward me. And this is what we call rear versus wrap confusion. Happens a lot now. And so here the dog chooses to wrap, which is incorrect, unless that's what the handler wanted to do. And it's because the handler remains stationary. So in general, when you throw on the brakes and you stop, the dog is always going to come back towards you. If you move and pressure the line, the dog will turn away from you. All right. We'll go ahead and move on to the next part of the course. And I do love this dog. Okay. Okay, here we talked about straight tunnels on our last one. And let's look at what's going on. You can see that the handler's starting to fall behind and slow down right before the dog goes in. Right, so the dog is thinking, come find the handler. Here the dog exits and is immediately turning. Right? Handler is slowed down. And now the handler has to put up the opposite arm. And remember what I was telling you earlier? The opposite arm, some people use it to turn away from the handler. So she's turning the dog away, trying to get the dog committed to this jump. You saw her use the opposite arm. And so that begs the question, when I'm going to talk with this handler, I'm going to say, okay, the opposite arm earlier caused your dog to come toward you, right? Whether you threw up the correct arm or not, it doesn't matter. Right arm, the dog turned toward you. Here, the right arm, you put it up, and then you wanted the dog to move away from you, right? And so I'm going to wonder about the use of the opposite arm in her style or system of handling. All right, and I feel like that's something that she needs to clean up to avoid future confusion in both of those situations. All right. Here again, the dog is curling toward her, and now she throws up the opposite arm. And again, it's to get the dog over this jump. So here she's using the opposite arm to push the dog away from her. And we talked about front cross timing. We're going to stop it right here. We know she's going to do a front cross. We saw her start it. Here's the takeoff point for the dog, and the handler is still moving in this direction and has not yet started the front cross. Here she starts the front cross. There's the first step. The dog has already landed, so this is too late. She goes left, right, left, right, left, right. Okay, so that's the 6-step front cross. One of the things we like to do is really do a 4-step front cross, tighten up our front cross so we can get going in the direction we need to go, which is right here. Right at this moment, the handler is facing and moving with this big power step in the direction we want the dog to go. So we want the handler to look like this, but we want the handler to look like that over here and much sooner. How much sooner? Well, hopefully by the time the dog has landed. So this front cross is super duper late, at least 1.6 seconds late, right? So this is a really slow, late front cross, and you're gonna get a really wide turn because the dog thinks they're taking the viaduct. Here the dog is headed right for the viaduct, and now the dog starts to turn. All right. So a lot of people think if I put up the opposite arm, the dog is going to understand the front cross is about to come. Okay, but I'm going to tell you that for 99% of dogs, it doesn't matter. They're waiting. They need to see the feet. They need to see the direction. They need to see you moving that way. And when you're moving backwards, you're actually just generating motion toward the viaduct. All right, so she's driving her dog along toward the viaduct, and we get the late front cross here. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Here we have a nice rear cross. I think there's a little over rotation. So on rear crosses, you want to be able to face this way and pressure your dog, but she's afraid the dog is going to go into the tunnel. So handlers compensate by over rotating to bring the dog this way. And unfortunately, it shows them the rear cross late, right? Because when you're doing this, in the dog's mind, okay, mom, I'm coming, and we're going this way or this way for sure. We're going to one of these. But then suddenly the dog's over the bar, and in this case, the dog chose this tunnel entrance. The dog's over the bar, but now suddenly mom's doing a rear cross, right? And so now the dog's going to turn off it, but you can see it's too late. The dog has gone straight in this instead of slice and turn, knowing the turn is coming. And that's all set up by the over rotation here. So we want to work on the dog's commitment on rear crosses.
And that's also going to be a very common bar. If you're pressuring your rear cross late, that can cause the bar to fall down. It didn't here. But
Right. Sub 3 seconds. Very good. Nice finish. Great run. Love this dog. So I think with this handler, I'm going to work on those spots, and we're going to look at a variety of runs and fix that and make sure that she's consistent with her arm signaling so the dog can know and anticipate, because I'm guessing that the dog has 2 kinds of bars. One is spacing issues, which may or may not be related to experience. I would definitely get the dog jump work and jump shoots that are slightly curved and straight and all that for sure. And then the other thing that I'm going to work on is getting my cues in a timely way, because if the dog is taking off straight, but they are supposed to turn, they often will try and turn over the bar, and that's going to cause drop bars, right? So a lot of bar knocking happens because of late cues, especially if they happen on front crosses. So for myself, at like big events and preliminaries, I would often choose to do rear crosses instead of front crosses to give myself a better chance of getting in the finals for my own bar knocking retriever. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our third and final one, and then we will wrap it up. Okay, is this set properly? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so here we have a little bit more middle of the road, not an international course, but we do have a highly trained, outstanding dog, very good handler. And this handler wanted to know what was going on with a dropped bar and anything else that we might see. And so a common theme that we've had here with all of our handlers so far, our 2 handlers so far, is late front crossing. And so I'm going to look for spots where we're turning, and here we have a front cross. Okay, so here we have a front cross. It looks really good. If we roll through it, we think, okay, that dog did that front cross fine. But you know me, it's not just good enough to do it. I want to take a look at it. Here's the plant foot. So the timing of this front cross is very good. The dog is not yet taken off, right? So she's doing the front cross plenty early, right? Next thing I want to check for front cross is footwork. There should be 4 steps, left, right, left, right. Here's left, right, left, and now we should get a right, which is a power step. It sets the line. And you can see that she's not yet done with the front cross. Okay, and there's the power step. Sets the line, and that helps the dog really dig in. So even though the dog is going to take off, there's traps, etc. The very first stride is not this way. It's not at a slight angle. The very first stride, the dog really digs in and is able to come back this way, right? So you have good timing, beautiful, perfect footwork. The only adjustment I might make and try a little bit, if we draw an imaginary line from this wing to this wing here, I would try and front cross on that line as the handler, anywhere along that line. It doesn't matter which jump you're closer to. In general, you want to be closer to the red jump since that's what's next. And you can see here that on this imaginary line, she's way over here. And that kind of gives the dog more room to go wide. Whereas if she's over here, the dog's going to fight a little bit harder to tighten up that line. So 3 things we look at: timing, footwork, and position. The first 2 are very good. Position's a little not great, but doesn't seem to be affecting the dog too much here. Okay, here we go into the weave pulls. Beautiful weave pulls, tough entry. On non-straight entry, on a straight entry on turf, the fastest dogs in the world are going to go about 2.4, 2.44, 2.6, somewhere in there. You can see on a sharp turn, this dog is doing 2.5. So we know this dog kind of has like world-class speed, right? This is really good. And here's the bar. Okay, so let's zoom in, and we're going to take a look at this bar and talk a little bit about that. This dog's jumping 24 inches. Ignore that red circle. And we're coming out of the weave pulls, and I want you to see a couple of things. First is the distance between the weave pulls and the jump. What does everybody think? Right? Since this is not a jump here, if this were a jump, these jumps would be a little too close for me. It's not a jump, but I think you still have to be worried about the striding, right? So here the dog is coming out. So let's say that's, let's go 1 hit. Yeah, let's just call this 1 hit. 1 hit, 2 hit. We're clearly too far away, so we need 1 more. 3, and we're still a little bit far away. Do you see that? So we want the dog a little bit closer. And here we're going to get a thigh, maybe the right foot. It's hard to see. But you can see the dog takes off a little too soon. And so here maybe the dog is not fully lengthened out. Maybe if the dog had extended a little more and taken off a little closer. So I don't know if this is an experience thing. I don't love the spacing here. The other thing to consider is the handler in the landing space. So if the dog takes off here, this is the area that needs to be clear. I feel like the handler is outside of that area. Some dogs, even if you're outside of the area, they will still jump a little short and take off a little early to avoid running into you. So at the moment of takeoff, we check the handler, but to me, she's out of the way. So I think she's giving the dog space. The last thing to check is what's coming next, right? So ideally, the dog knows at the takeoff which way they're going. If I showed you this picture here, I think we would all say the dog is not turning, right? The dog is definitely going straight. This is a very straight takeoff, straight approach, and the dog lands turned. Okay, so we know at some point during this jump, the dog is making an effort to twist to the right. Perhaps that caused the bar. We don't know. Okay, so the only thing that I could say about this bar is maybe it's a spacing, maybe it's a lack of experience, maybe it's just one of those bars that just happened, and maybe it's because the dog didn't know the turn was coming until they were already in the air. They made an effort to turn over the bar, and dogs are a little more likely to drop bars when that happens. Okay, and you can see that the dog has to really dig in and barely makes this jump. Right, so this spacing here is super tight to me. Look, the dog hits once, twice, and has to basically hop over, right? So the spacing, whatever you think of the spacing between the weave and this jump, the spacing between this jump and this jump is way too tight, right? It's just not even giving the dogs a chance, right? So look at it again. 1, 2, and barely gets over. So a lot of times we'll look at this and say, okay, well, we think the dog had enough space before this jump. But often you think of jumping as the before and the after of the bar. I don't just look at before and did they have enough space before. I look at after and say, do they have enough space after? Because in the dog's calculation, they have to consider both this bar, but also the next bar, which they know is coming now, right? At some point. They know that turn is coming and they have another jump to make. It's like if you're doing the hurdles. You're not doing the hurdles one at a time. You know, if you're a human sprinter on a track, you know the hurdle there's another hurdle coming after this one. And that if you do everything you can to clear the first hurdle, you may put yourself in very poor position for the next hurdle, right? So every hurdle jump has to take in consideration not only the bar you're hurdling over now, but the next one. And so our dogs are doing super complicated calculations just like that as well. All right, so on this handler here, this is all very good, running just a basic loop. And again, we have a landing here. We're going to take this jump. The handler is putting the arm out. But I think the handler wants the dog to know that something's about to happen. Right here we see the arm, the opposite arm. You can see it sticking out there. Here's the takeoff. Dog's front feet are in the air. So let's back up to right at the takeoff point, which is right here behind this pole. So I'm gonna say that this front cross, which I assume this is what's happening, could be a front cross, could turn into throttle. We don't know, and that's something I do want everybody to note. Throttle and start of the front cross look exactly the same, so we have to use a different verbal cue to help the dog. But the arm is up. The front cross is started with good timing. So I think the timing here is good. We go right, left, and now I'm checking the footwork. Right, and now we need this left foot to come around, and that'll turn the whole handler's body and set this line for the red jump. But that doesn't happen. We get a back step, that's 4, that's 5, that's 6. So this is a 6-step front cross, and at this moment the line is set, it's too late. You can see that the dog has gone wide. The dog's gone this way and is taking the jump this way. You see that? We want the dog taking off this way, right? So if she's racing another border collie, the border collie that does this is going to beat her dog that did this every time. And so the question here is, why did this dog turn wide here? So everybody can see it clearly now, right? Over the red pole, the dog turns wide. And this is something that unless you have the coach's eye, you're not going to notice it, right? Maybe a very experienced trainer is going to notice it, a coach. You know, I'm going to notice it, Sarah Baker, Jennifer Crank, sure, we're going to notice it, right? But not everybody will. And a lot of people are going to get the advice, hey, you need a front cross sooner. We know that's not the problem here, right? Front cross started plenty early. Handler was already rotating before the dog even took off with the front feet. Okay, so in this case, I think it's the poor footwork that didn't let the handler get around and set that line, which created the wide turn here. Okay, position I think is okay. If you draw an imaginary line, it's from this wing to this wing here. So you can see that's a very long, flat line. The handler can front cross anywhere on that line pretty comfortably and get a good result from the dog. Okay, so this is how I want you guys to think about handling analysis. You're going to freeze the video at takeoff. Here's the takeoff, another one. Where should the dog go after this jump? It should be very clear. So in my opinion, it's this jump here. Okay, and then we roll forward. Yep, that's the correct jump. Okay. Here we see the front cross is happening. Here's the first step again. This is at the takeoff. So you can see this front cross is starting a little bit later than the others, but not too much. Let's check the footwork. Left, right, left. And then we have a weak power step. The handler is choosing to remain open to the dog. I prefer that the handler, you can look over your shoulder, you can leave your arm for the dog, but we want to face the chest and move forward here. That's going to tighten the dog up more than anything. So you can see the dog goes a little bit wide here. So I would like a stronger step, a slightly earlier front cross, and as the dog is landing, I want to be chest forward to really tighten up that line, to give the dog a chance to dig in. Here again, we're at the takeoff. To me, this is extension. The dog wants to go forward, handler's facing forward, handler's moving forward. It turns out that the handler wanted a wrap, so here we need to have more decel. So we need to stop. But you can see she takes a big step forward. That's an accelerating step, so the dog is immediately going to launch. The dog is immediately going to launch instead of putting in that extra stride we desire for really tight wraps. All right, and then Sarah wants to jump in here.
Yeah, so one thing that I wanted to point out here when we talk about this big step here that cued the acceleration, if we pair that with the idea that she could have finished the front cross and powered a little bit more in this direction, if she had done that, she would have actually been accelerating towards this jump and then had some time and some space to show a bigger contrast in her handling, a bigger deceleration. But instead, she's actually decelerating here as she waits for her dog to respond. And so now, even though she's not moving quickly, because she was stopped, anything in this direction is acceleration from a stop. And so that little bit of movement there is actually acceleration from a stop rather than running through and having a deceleration as the dog comes into the takeoff for that jump.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, looking at this dog and this handler team, obviously great handling, great dog. They're running a great system. Everything looks really good. You're talking about very small tweaks at this level. But they can have very big impacts on your times and whether or not bars stay up, and being super competitive at the really big events where you're up against dogs that are just as good as your dog, when you're up against handlers who are just as good as you at handling. And actually, let me see, how about a blind cross in what spot?
I believe that was back here on the very first front cross, this front cross that we were talking about here.
Yeah, I think you can use a blind cross out there. It's very safe, even though the turn is quite sharp. It's flat. There's no off-course obstacles, and I think it's okay because you're trying to get around the post anyway. In general, for blind crosses, I don't like to turn if it's 90 degrees or more. That's just a rule of thumb. There are some top handlers around the world who will do it. The guy that I think of most often, of course, is Pavel Vakonic, who is from Slovakia, got gold and silver individual large dogs a couple years ago. 2 dogs, same trial, same world championship. And even with his Shelties, very small Sheltie, will really push the envelope of where you're going to put in blind crosses. So he's going to blind cross in a lot of spots where me and other similar handlers we don't typically blind cross there because we feel like we're going to show our dogs late. Pavel is, of course, like 6 feet tall, slender, super athletic. If you watch videos of him running a lot on Facebook, about 30% of the time he's not wearing a shirt because he's ripped. So, you know, he can get to spots and show his dogs these turns a little bit better. So just because he's doing a blind cross doesn't mean he's doing a blind cross in the same way that you and I would be doing those blind crosses. So just something to think about. Yeah, I think that's what we have. We're just about an hour here. And one thing I did want to note, I've forgotten, and Sarah reminded me, that this dog that we just looked at in the third video is actually was selected as an alternate for the FCI Agility World Championship. That's the team the AKC is sending. So a world team member this year, certainly congratulations. And everyone can clearly see why. Dog's phenomenal. Handling is phenomenal. When you watch them work, it's just beautiful. So very good. But I like all the videos that we chose here because you can see how, even with really good dogs or even with runs that look really good when you watch them in real speed or in person, you can find those areas for improvement, but not just for a little bit of improvement here and there, but really making tweaks to your whole system of handling so you can get those improvements everywhere on every run where those sequences happening. Because one thing we all know about agility is you see something once, you're going to see it again. And if you're bad at something, of course you're going to get it at the most inopportune time when you don't want to see it. The judge is going to put it in there for you. So we definitely want to prepare for those kinds of challenges. All right, if anybody has any follow-up questions, be sure to put them in the comments. We will be coming behind to answer them. Hopefully you found this useful.
And we'll be doing this again next week. So on Monday, we'll be emailing our email list and soliciting for videos. So
yeah, so tell your friends. And you can have disaster runs. You can have, whatever. But generally, if you're confused about something and you're really not sure why something happened, I think those are great learning opportunities. And I definitely want to say thank you very much to these three handlers for putting themselves out there and letting us break down their runs like this.
Yeah, and I think I'm seeing lots of hearts and thumbs up and thank yous. So I think that we're going to have to say that the technology was good enough to do this and to make it worthwhile next week. So if you have problems,
thank you to you for doing it. Sarah's all our tech support, and
That's right.
10 minutes before this thing, it wasn't working, and she had to go and fix it and get on, messaging with the tech support people.
All right. So yeah, we will be doing this next week, and thank you to everybody who joined us live. It makes it a lot more fun.